We are a creative technology company. We are consultants. We build digital services and business for and with our clients. Our clients such as, for instance, just as an example, we work with in fashion with Adidas on Adidas e-commerce transformation and direct-to-consumer transformation. So we build this kind of services and through that transformation also. Now, I have personally worked in quite a few fields around transformation. My background is in digital technology. I'm a designer. I do what we call business design. So I have a designer's mindset and a digital technology background to kind of power the thinking behind this. So I worked with Adidas, with Chalhoub Group. You might not know it. It's a big luxury fashion retailer in the Middle East. Accor Hotels in hospitality, and also the Swedish, all of our dear friend, the tax agency, around transformation around AI. So, if we jump into, let's first start with understanding transformation. So, I would like to highlight, this is one view of transformation. I don't claim this is the correct one, or this is how it should be thought about. But one view of transformation is this. Industry transformation tends to be a systematic and system-level shift towards creating more value and with less waste and less friction, as we say in the design community. Now, let me give you a practical example of what this might mean. So, let's take music, the transformation of music. Now, it's good to cultivate the mindset of keeping in mind what is the ultimate customer value in anything we do, regardless of industry. What is the actual job to be done, in Christensen's parlance? The customer here at the far right. In the music industry, the point is to be able to listen to music. Now, some of us might remember the time when you had to use CD discs and actually carry the music around. You had to use it on physical media. You had to have a dedicated hardware player to be able to listen to it. Then came along the MP3 technology. You still had to cultivate your own collection. You still had to kind of have the dedicated hardware device and so forth. Then eventually, the whole industry transformed into what we now know streaming. So from a customer value point of view, from the job to be done of being able to listen to music, it has been a tremendous increase in value. You can listen to anything, anywhere, anytime at this point. It's as close to perfect as you can kind of get in a sense. From a value capture perspective, from how you make money of this, it has changed tremendously also. The record industry is down to half its revenue from what it used to be. And also Spotify at some point used to be more valued than the 4 biggest record labels in the world. So this is a brutal transformation of the industry. The point here is that this tends to be the trajectory that transformation takes. Now, it's not restricted to what we might think of digital industries or information industries, but also physical goods, the same thing, services. Take cars as an example, which is in the transition of mobility, which is in the transition from internal combustion engines to electric. It's a massive technology transformation for the car industry, but it's also, on top of that, a transformation from the customer value point of view, the transformation of mobility. And the transformation there is from selling cars and be done with it, to selling something and a service contract, have some kind of continuous relationship with the client, which tends to be the trajectory, into something that is now moving into access over ownership type. We don't need, especially the young generation, we don't need to own a car. I don't own a car. I have 2 kids, and I rent a car. So my point is that there tends to be a shift toward whatever works the most seamless way, and it might mean profound change for the players in the industry and across the value chain. Now, the problem with this, let's see. Can you switch the slides actually? Can you put the next one, please? The problem with this is that this customer's problem space, as we call it in design, what is the value you provide? What is the problem you solve? It doesn't come naturally to most companies, especially companies who are really good at doing something that they do. One example is, just to highlight that this is not a new phenomenon. This is not something of the internet age or the last 5 years. 150 years ago, there used to be an ice trade, especially in North America. typically the companies that did the ice harvesting back in 1850 were not the companies that transformed into industrially produced ice. And those companies typically weren't the ones who transformed into refrigerators. It's the same pattern we still see 150 years later, a failure to see what the ultimate value is, to be able to cool something in your home. So this is a point about transformation. Next slide, please. And, oh, well, so the problem here is that company transformation, we talked about industry transformation just now. So company transformation tends to be about adapting to this external change. It tends to be, at the essence, about aligning your capabilities, what you're really good at, with what the world needs. So what tends to happen in these instances is that when you're in equilibrium, what you're good at is what the world needs. What tends to happen is that what the world needs shifts. And then you're kind of no longer relevant. Can you go one step forward, please? So this is the tricky part in transformation. The tricky part is not to follow what's happening. The tricky part is to transform yourself so that you can still cater to that changing need. Okay. And here, just a kind of brief. If you look at research and especially also in my experience, transformation, the number one obstacle to transformation, success and transformation, is mindset. It's exactly this problem of seeing what is and being incremental about it. How can we create better sameness? Rather than being able to take the mindset of what value are we actually producing? What other ways might there be to create such value? And going into transformation, the primary root cause tends to be lack of engagement in the people and the personnel. Now this goes from senior leadership all the way to the employees. So that's kind of setting the problem stage. Now, 3 learnings from our work transforming companies. Number 1, and bear in mind I come from a technology-driven transformation background. Number 1 is to create a clear vision for the change that is required. It's really, I cannot emphasize enough, you need to understand the change you're about to embark on. And this is the most difficult part, because if you think of yourself as being in an industry, let's say you're in the industry of CD distribution, just to use the example from before, you easily fail to see the need to transform into some other means of conveying data. So this is really the crucial point, to truly understand what the change you need is about, and put that into a narrative that's understandable. And it's really important to stay in the problem space, to stay in the what problem are we solving. Okay, second one. Second learning is, this is something that we see from company to company that we help transform. It's typically a good idea to combine a top-down and a bottom-up approach. Now, what I mean with that is the top-down approach of the logic. What do we need to do? For instance, you might be a retailer that needs to, or let's say you might need a brand. You might be a brand transitioning into direct-to-consumer. It's a very different set of capabilities. It's a very different way of operating than wholesaling to channel partners, to actually dealing with clients and customers directly. It's a very different set of capabilities. So that's one transformation. So the top-down logic, what you set out to do, needs to be coherent with the bottom-up things that you're actually changing. And one thing is to just build something and learn, because the key learning is that you cannot plan and execute your way into the new state. You can't just describe the apple, you need to taste it. So it's a good idea to build something and learn, and make that a way of working. And then, as the third, and this is rather specific, but a classic problem that we see almost in every larger organization is that the organization is really set up to execute what it does best, which is what it has done for a long time. And the definition of transformation is that that's no longer what is expected. So typically there's some kind of matrix structure, and this structure just isn't very well suited to do things differently. So the key learning is to use cross-functional teams, which means that you pick the disciplines, the expertise that you need to solve a problem. put them together, shield them from all the other work in the organization, and just let them work on the problem. It might be a designer, it might be a data scientist, it might be someone with domain expertise of retail or brand or something, but to put them together and work. We have seen time and time again such teams creating in 2 weeks what the organization has been incapable of doing for 6 months. So this is a rather specific piece of advice, but this is something that we really see working. Now, I'd like to touch briefly upon the question of how to transform the fashion industry. And as is usually the case when you have high uncertainty, I have to say, I don't know how to transform the fashion industry. But typically, it's not about having the right answers, it's more about having the right questions. So I'd like to provoke a few questions around how we might, as a collective, and maybe the people in this room, go about doing so. So let's take the kind of like a different approach than the classical retailer brand kind of supplier, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supplier, and look at from a sustainability perspective. We have, as I see it, we have two big pressures of transformation in fashion. One is technology still, digital technology, digital transformation. The other one is this of sustainability of the overall system. Like Konrad mentioned, overproduction of garments. So we might think of it use, make, acquire, use, care, and eventually discard, just as one way of kind of structuring it. Now, and then, just to remind you, we have the customer, the ultimate customer at the far right again. Yeah, next please. So, we see a lot of opportunities and transformation happening now in the design and manufacture space, and also in this, what we might think of as recycle, repurpose, and remanufacturing. There's a lot of things happening in the supply chain, if you like. So there's lots of opportunities there, and kind of transformation there. I'm sure we'll hear about that later on today. And next up, we have also what traditionally has been the retail, what retailers are doing. And there's this transformation of customer understanding in the retail space. We have this move from single product direct to consumer companies who do something really, really well in fashion too. They can now reach a global audience through Shopify, through Instagram. They no longer need to rely on channel partners and retailers to do so. So this is a transformation in and of itself. But the main thing happening here is customer understanding. And this, for instance, working with Chaloub in Dubai, which is a retailer of 60 luxury French brands such as Chanel and Dior. Imagine 60 brands across 10 countries. Imagine the opportunity of customer understanding across these brands. So they are in a really unique position to capitalize on that. However, they need to build the capabilities to do so. That's something that might happen in this space, regardless of the brands. Next one, we might have, and this is currently a lot of interest among these companies, is around maintenance, repair, reselling, and sharing. And one of the reasons is that this provides an access to be meaningful for people, to clients, between transactions. You only buy a jacket once, and then you might use it for 3 years, and then you come back. It's good to have some kind of relationship, meaningful, be able to produce value in between. So this is what's partly interesting there from a purely kind of business perspective. From a sustainability perspective, it's like genuine attempts at betterment, to make what we create last longer through these different mechanisms that we might see here. And next, if we look at how this might have an impact again back to design and back to how we create things, and how, if we think about it now, that if we become really, well, if we can combine the kind of consumer sentiment that we see to wanting to use things more to be sustainable, with actually being able to resell and share and maintain clothes so that they last longer, that's something that probably has an impact on the manufacturing of it. Finally, will we have a garment that's built to last, that can actually produce the value it was manufactured to produce. I'll come back to this point really shortly, briefly. Okay, but next one. Notice one thing that we haven't talked about that's missing here from my talk before about customer value, and that is the use phase. And that is, to me, a really puzzling thing, because as an industry, as a fashion industry, we know a lot about what our consumers, our users of clothes, like, what they do, what they buy, what they kind of, and as we see, and we will hear later today, we only recycle 1%. So we typically have a good view of the supply chain, what goes into making something, what goes into selling it, and so forth. We have very little insights actually into how people use what they do, which is curious to me because, as I think of it, that is the actual value-producing part of all of this. None of this would exist unless we had the need to, well, cover ourselves, firstly, functionally, and then maybe look good, feel good. All the rest is kind of subdued to the actual use. And this is something that's puzzling. It's really notoriously difficult to follow. But as a final note, quick note, I have happened to end up on a path that enlightens this. And I would like to leave us with a thought that invoking this perspective might bring into transforming fashion. So far, just to kind of recapitalize a bit, remember that transformation is about adapting from a company perspective to external change. We see a lot of external change. We see this change at a system level. In order to bring about betterment in fashion, as I see it, it really requires the system to work as a whole. If we produce more durable goods, they need to be used more in order for that to make sense in the long run. So let's have a quick look at use. The background is that 1.5 years, I ended up personally on this journey that I have later become, that I have come to call Wardrobe Diary. It's an open project, and it's basically following everything I wear. Everything I own, everything I wear, every single day. I've been doing it for 4.5 years. I made this publicly available. Maybe the world can learn something from it. And next, I ended up on Swedish TV news, and that ended up me having now some 700 Swedish users doing the same thing. So now I have visibility into the actual use of clothes. And we can now contrast that with how people's perceptions of their uses and what their actual use is. And next, so it's really interesting what we can see and what gaps we can see in what people think they use, what they would like to be, how sustainable we would like to be, and what we are, and what the kind of reality is, the grim reality in some sense. And I'll leave you with this example that I see in the open wardrobe data. I'm following some roughly 1 million euros or roughly 10 million Swedish krona worth of items, some 30,000 pieces of garment every day. So this is from that. And I'll just leave you with this thought. The average Swedish wardrobe is to a value of 9,000 euros. Think of that. We don't necessarily think of that as an investment. It's a rather sizable chunk of capital tied up in our wardrobes. Yet we think of it as kind of consumables. We think of it as kind of gone. We don't think about it like this. I can see from the data that roughly 50% of our wardrobes, of all the items, are really rarely used. And by rarely used, I mean less than 4 times per year. And the final number, 20 euros, roughly, is that we have many garments for which the actual cost per wear for the consumer is roughly 20 euros or 200 krona. So to me, as a kind of business designer, if you take the next slide, please. If we look at use, what kinds of opportunities does that bring? Well, that means that suddenly, at least conceptually, the economics of renting, of sharing in a different way makes total sense, because in effect, we are all paying quite a lot for the clothes that we have. And if you think of it, think of a jacket that's been manufactured to last for, let's say, 400 times, that's actually used only 10. If we can find mechanisms in a kind of idea of transforming the industry to distribute this, to make sure that this garment finds its way to actually produce that value. If it cannot do it with one person, maybe it can do it with many. My point is that at a 20 euro cost is factual at the moment. We don't need to lose money doing this. The industry can still make the same money and still be a lot better, if you like. So then my final point here is that if we look at use and start to gain an understanding of how people actually use what we produce, then we can see next one, please. That how this all connects. How does this connect to design? How does this connect to business models? How does this connect to the whole kind of retailing, direct to consumer, this whole world? How does this connect to the reselling and repair and maintenance? So I'm thinking that if we go back and think about, again, being guided by the ultimate kind of customer value, and keep that in mind as a kind of industry. And each one of us, we have our little space somewhere on this map, which is just one way of representing it. We can do our part, and collectively, I believe that we can help bring about the solutions that are the kind of, the things we do that are solutions to the ultimate problem, that we see that the consumers here really are seeking more, and we'll hear more about that, more sustainable ways of being fashionable and dressing themselves. So this is one view of transformation of fashion. And if to recapitulate a bit, remember, keep an eye on ultimate customer value. Understand what you're producing. What is that a solution to? Think of the system level. What if we can get much more use out of one piece of garment? What does that mean for the rest of the whole system, if you like, and be part of that change? That would be my kind of take on how to transform an industry. And then, I don't know how fashion will transform. I would just say that rather than trying to plan yourself to have the right answers, it's good to keep an open mind and keep asking the right questions. I don't know, but I'm personally trying to be part of it and trying to push for betterment for all of us. So that's one perspective of transformation in fashion. And I need to step down for the following speakers. But if you're interested, I would love to have a chat, and let's continue over lunch or so. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Olof, stick around just 30 seconds here.
Of
Thank
course.
you so much for this perspective. And at Scandinavian Mind, we actually learned about you through your sort of wardrobe data project, where you documented everything you wore for a amount of time. Just quickly, was there anything that surprised you when you started to analyzing your own wardrobe that you didn't wear, or that you actually wore more than you thought?
Oh, indeed. And yes, as a comment on that, Scandinavian Mind, you guys were actually the first to report on this thing, so you picked that up early. So yes, for myself, it's the same that I see in the patterns with all the rest of the users. It's the difference between what I thought, I genuinely thought. I've used this probably 100 times, I think, yeah, that makes sense. Then I follow the data and see, no, it's 12. And then, oh, my shirt, I like kind of high quality shirts. I probably used them 150 times, and then I see, no, that particular shirt actually 30 times, and actually it turns out that they don't last more than maybe 40. They just kind of don't last longer than that. So my perception of my own behavior and my actual behavior were really different. That's something that surprised me a lot, and that's something that I now see with these hundreds of other users that are using the system also. So I think of this as a positive kind of force, in that we all seem to want to do good, but we don't know how. So as a way of researching consumer behavior, I think it's really nice, and that's what I'm doing with some companies in fashion now, is that it's not only about researching what consumers think about themselves, it's about helping consumers understand themselves better also. Because in this big system that we see, I'm thinking that we need, of course, a change in consumer behavior, but we also need the whole system to kind of adapt and support that. So we have this very complex thing to kind of try to navigate.
Thank you so much, Olof. And it should be noted also that the Reaktor is also, I think you mentioned in the beginning, but you are based here in Stockholm as well, for anyone who wants to get in touch.
Yes, we're headquartered in Helsinki. We have offices in Lisbon and Amsterdam and New York and Tokyo also. But we do have clients in Stockholm, and we have people in Stockholm. So if you're at all interested in any of what we talked about, to have a chat, of course, we'd love to have that chat.
Right. Thank you, Olof.
Thank you.